The first thing I heard was my daughter trying not to scream. That was worse than screaming. Screaming meant panic had somewhere to go. This sound was trapped small, folded into itself like Lily had already learned that crying too loudly could make the adults angrier. I was supposed to be across town sitting in a glass conference room explaining missing escrow funds to a board of people who smiled like fraud was just an accounting error. But the meeting had been cancelled. And I had come home 40 minutes early with a half-cold coffee in my cup holder and rain sliding down my windshield. My phone buzzed as I turned onto our street. Interior audio detected. I opened the security app expecting a dropped book, maybe Lily talking to herself after school. Then my father's voice filled my car speakers. "Stop crying and tell me where your mother keeps the silver folder. Don't make me ask again." My hands went numb on the steering wheel. For 3 seconds I forgot I knew how to think. I forgot every forensic report I had ever built, every bank statement I had ever traced, every lie I had ever caught, because numbers do not know how to blush. All I knew was that my 9-year-old daughter was inside my house with my father, and he was using the voice he used when he wanted people to shrink. Then my sister Vanessa spoke from somewhere farther away, probably my bedroom. "Check the desk drawer, again, Dad. Nora always hides important papers near boring things." I pulled to the curb 2 houses down and killed the engine. Through the rain I could see my front porch light glowing softly, the same light Lily said made the house look like it was waiting for us. My father's truck was not in the driveway, Vanessa's car was not on the street. They had hidden them somewhere nearby, which told me this was not a misunderstanding. This was planned. I did not run to the door. That may sound impossible for a mother to understand, but fear had burned so hot inside me that it became clear. I opened the live camera feed and switched between rooms. The hallway camera showed my father, Grant Whitaker, standing with one hand on the wall beside the living room, entrance blocking Lily from the stairs. He was 70, but still carried himself like the county badge he had retired from 15 years earlier was pinned to his chest. Lily sat on the edge of the sofa in her school cardigan, clutching her stuffed rabbit so tightly its ear was twisted in her fist. Vanessa moved in and out of frame carrying papers, my papers from the back bedroom. She had one of my document boxes tucked under her arm, and my mother's old cedar jewelry case balanced against her hip. "Lily," my father said softer now, which somehow made it uglier. "If your mother loved this family, she wouldn't make us do this." That sentence told me exactly what they had come for. Not the television, not cash, not jewelry, not even the house itself. They were looking for the Cedar Trust documents, the protected account my mother had left for Lily before she died. For years, Dad and Vanessa had called it unfair, secretive, insulting. For years, I had told myself they were grieving badly, not greedily. I had paid Vanessa's late mortgage once. I had covered Dad's property taxes twice. I had wired money for emergencies that became vacations, legal bills that became digital appointments, medical debts that vanished the moment I asked for invoices. I was the responsible daughter, the cold daughter, the daughter who made money, and therefore owed everyone forgiveness. But the trust was different. It was Lily's future. My mother had made me promise never to let anyone turn that little girl's inheritance into family rescue money. Now Lily was crying in her own living room because they had finally stopped asking me and started hunting through my child. I opened my contacts and called Elias Mercer. He answered on the second ring, his voice calm enough to make me feel the floor beneath me again. "Nora," he said. I kept my eyes on the camera feed as Vanessa opened my desk drawer and dumped tax folders onto the floor. "They're inside," I whispered. "My father and Vanessa. They used Lily. They're looking for the silver folder. Elias did not ask me if I was sure. That was why I trusted him. He had been my mother's attorney before he became mine. And he knew exactly what that folder meant. "Where are you?" he asked. "Outside. Do not enter yet unless Lily is in immediate physical danger. I'm activating the trust protocol and calling the security dispatcher now. Keep your phone recording. Police will be notified through the system, and I'm sending the emergency packet to Detective Rains." My father's voice came through the app again. "Your mother can lose more than papers, Lily. Courts listen when grandfathers say a child isn't safe." Something ancient and obedient inside me cracked cleanly in half. I had spent half my life hearing that tone and calling it discipline. I had watched Vanessa roll her eyes while Dad lectured me about loyalty, sacrifice, blood, respect, all the words people use when they want access without accountability. But Lily had never signed up for that inheritance of fear. She did not owe him silence. She did not owe Vanessa a future bought with her tears. I stepped out into the rain, locked my car behind me, and walked toward my house with my phone in one hand and Elias still on the line. My pulse was loud, but my mind had become a ledger child. First door, second witnesses, third evidence everywhere. I opened the front door with my code, and the small chime made everyone freeze. Lily saw me first. Her face changed so quickly it almost brought me to my knees. "Mom," she whispered, and my father turned around like I was the one who had broken in. Vanessa appeared behind him in the hallway wearing leather gloves she would later claim were for dust allergies. My silver folder was in one hand, my mother's jewelry case in the other, and a folded stack of forms peeked from her oversized purse. Dad recovered first. "He always did. You weren't supposed to be home," he said, then seemed to hear himself and corrected it with a hard cough. "I mean, we were worried because you wouldn't answer." I looked past him at Lily. Her cheeks were wet, but she was standing now, ready to run if I gave her permission. "Lily, come to me," I said. Dad shifted half an inch, just enough to test whether I would still obey old rules. I raised my phone so he could see the active call. "Move," I said. Vanessa laughed once, thin and nervous. "Are you recording your own family now?" I looked at the silver folder in her hand and answered, "No. I'm recording 2 adults who broke into my home and made my daughter cry." Dad's face hardened in a way I knew too well. It was the look he wore when someone challenged him in front of witnesses, when authority stopped being natural and had to be performed. "Careful, Nora," he said, lowering his voice as if Lily were not standing there trembling. "You're upset. You came home, saw a few open drawers, and now you're making this something it isn't." I stepped fully into the living room and kept my body between him and Lily. She rushed to me so fast her shoulder hit my ribs, and I wrapped one arm around her without taking my eyes off either of them. "A few open drawers," I repeated. "Vanessa has my trust folder, my mother's jewelry case, and what looks like legal forms in her purse. You were asking my child for documents she had no business knowing about." Vanessa's mouth twisted. "Don't act dramatic. We came because you ignored us. Families don't need appointments." "That's funny," I said, my voice quieter than I expected. "Because burglars don't usually make appointments either." Vanessa's expression flashed with panic before anger covered it. She threw the silver folder onto my coffee table and papers slid across the glass like evidence laying itself out. "There. Take your precious folder. God, you really think you're some untouchable queen because Mom trusted you with everything." Dad pointed at me, and for a second I saw the old sheriff in him. The man who could make a room believe he was the only adult present. "Your sister is drowning. Her license review is next month. She has a bridge loan due Friday. I have land tied up in court. You have more than enough sitting in that trust and you still refuse to help." Lily pressed closer to me. "Grandpa said you would lose the house," she whispered. Dad snapped. I said grown-up things she didn't understand. I looked at him and felt something inside me go completely still. "Tell me exactly what you wanted me to sign," I said. Vanessa crossed her arms, but her purse shifted open at her elbow. I saw the top of a form with Lily's full legal name typed neatly into a beneficiary line. That was when anger became something colder. "Vanessa," I said, "put the purse on the table." She laughed. "Absolutely not." Dad stepped forward. "You don't give orders in this family. This is not your family room," I said. "This is my house." He leaned close enough that I smelled rain and old coffee on his jacket. "This house was bought with help from your mother's money." "No," I said. "This house was bought with my salary, my credit, my down payment, and the part of my life I stopped giving away to you." His mouth tightened. He hated records. He hated exact numbers. He hated that I had spent 15 years learning how to make lies sit still on paper. The front security panel chimed again, sharper this time. Elias's voice came through my phone, low and firm. "Nora, officers are 3 minutes out. The trust lock is active. Do not let them remove anything." Dad's eyes flicked toward the phone. "Who is that?" he demanded. Vanessa went pale so quickly that I knew she recognized the name before I answered. "Elias Mercer," I said. "Mom's attorney. Mine now." For the first time, Dad looked less angry than startled. You called a lawyer on your own father. No, I said, looking at Lily's wet face. I called the person who knows what you came here to steal. Vanessa lunged toward the table, snatching for the silver folder, but I moved faster and pushed it behind me with my free hand. She stopped herself before touching me, maybe because the phone was still recording, maybe because she finally understood that the version of me who apologized first was not in the room anymore. Dad changed tactics so smoothly it almost impressed me. His shoulders dropped, his voice softened, and suddenly he became an old man wronged by a cold daughter. Nora, listen to me. We didn't want it to happen like this. Vanessa is scared. I'm scared. Your mother would have wanted us to stay together. Vanessa seized the opening and began to cry, not loudly, not messily, but in that careful way she used when she wanted witnesses to see pain without seeing calculation. I was going to pay it back, she said. You know I would. I just needed temporary collateral. The lender only needed proof that the Cedar Trust could back the loan. I stared at her. The trust belongs to Lily. Vanessa's tears vanished for half a second. She's 9. She doesn't need millions sitting untouched while her own aunt loses everything. Lily lifted her head. Aunt Vanessa said Grandma made a mistake, she whispered. She said I had to help fix it. That sentence hit harder than if Vanessa had slapped me. The sirens came next, faint at first beneath the rain, then rising fast. Dad heard them too. His performance cracked. Tell them it's a misunderstanding, he said. Right now, Nora. You can stop this before it ruins us. You should have thought about that before you hid your truck 2 streets away. Vanessa's head jerked up. Dad stared at me, and I saw the truth land. I had noticed all of it. The missing spare key after Lily's birthday dinner. Vanessa asking too casually about my office schedule. Dad offering to pick Lily up from school on the exact day I had a double meeting. The family group texts about sacrifice and selfishness that always came right before a financial demand. Behind me, Lily whispered, Mom, did I do bad? I turned just enough to kiss the top of her hair. No, baby. Adults did bad. You told the truth. Dad muttered, You're poisoning her against us. I looked back at him. No. You frightened her into clarity. When the police knocked, Dad tried to reach the door first, but I said, Stop, and this time he did. 2 officers entered after I unlocked it with one hand, both already alert because the dispatcher had received Elias's security report and live audio. The taller officer, a woman named Ramirez, asked, Who is the homeowner? I raised my hand. I am. Nora Whitaker. My father and sister entered without permission, searched my bedroom, pressured my daughter for trust documents, and attempted to remove property and legal paperwork. Dad lifted both palms with wounded dignity. Officer, I'm Grant Whitaker, retired King County Sheriff's Office. This is a family dispute. My daughter is overreacting because money is involved. Officer Ramirez did not blink. Sir, step away from the child. He looked offended, which told me he still believed his old title could open doors he had already broken through. Vanessa said, She's lying. Nora set this up because she hates sharing. The second officer, Hale, asked Vanessa to place her purse on the floor. She refused so quickly it answered half the question. Ma'am, he said, place the purse down. Vanessa looked at Dad, and that small glance destroyed the last of their innocence. Slowly she set it on the rug. When Officer Hale opened it, Lily buried her face in my side. He removed my mother's cedar jewelry case first. Then a copied set of my property records. Then a blank transfer of trust management form with my name already typed under resigning trustee. Then Lily's birth certificate copy. Then a notary stamp sealed in a plastic bag that did not belong to me, my bank, or any attorney I knew. Vanessa began sobbing for real then. It wasn't supposed to be used, she said. Dad hissed, Shut up. Officer Ramirez's eyes sharpened. Sir, do not coach her. The living room went silent, except for the rain tapping against the windows. Elias arrived before the officers finished photographing the room. He stepped inside carrying a leather folder and wearing the same calm expression he had worn at my mother's funeral when he told me privately that Margaret Whitaker had protected Lily because she knew love was not always enough to make people safe. Dad saw him and seemed to shrink, not physically, but historically, as if the past had walked in wearing a suit, Grant Elias said. I wish I could say I was surprised. Vanessa wiped her face. You can't be here. This is private family business. Elias looked at the officers, then at the fake stamp on the table. Attempted trust fraud involving a minor is not private family business. Dad tried again. We needed help. That's all. Nora refused to communicate. Elias opened his folder and placed one page on the table. Actually, Mr. Whitaker, Nora declined 6 written requests for unauthorized trust access. The 7th request was submitted this morning with a forged preliminary authorization. For a moment, I did not understand what I had heard. This morning, I asked. Elias nodded once and his voice softened when he turned to me. Before they entered your house, someone attempted to initiate a bridge loan verification using your name and Lily's trust as collateral. The bank flagged it because of the protective protocol your mother insisted on. Vanessa's mascara had begun to run. Dad looked at the wall. Neither of them denied it. That was how I knew the break-in was only the part I had caught with my own eyes. The real crime had started before Lily ever sat crying on that sofa. Officer Ramirez asked Dad to turn around. He refused with words, not movement. You're making a mistake, he told me as cuffs closed around his wrists. I held Lily tighter. No, I said, watching Vanessa get cuffed beside him. The mistake was thinking my daughter's fear could still buy my silence. That night, after the patrol cars disappeared into the wet Seattle dark, the house did not feel like a home. It felt like a crime scene that still remembered being warm. Lily sat on the kitchen counter while I cleaned a shallow scratch on her wrist from where she had scraped herself against the coffee table, trying to move away from Dad. She kept saying she was fine, but her voice had gone too polite, too careful, the way children sound when they think adults are breakable. Elias stayed at the dining table with Officer Ramirez, reviewing the preliminary inventory while rain pressed silver lines down the windows. My bedroom drawers were still open. My mother's jewelry case sat in a clear evidence bag. The silver folder lay on the table like a dead bird. I thought I should feel victorious because they had been caught, but all I felt was the terrible aftershock of understanding that my father and sister had known Lily would be alone and they had come anyway. After Lily finally fell asleep in my bed with every hallway light turned on, Elias asked me to sit down. He did not use the voice lawyers use when something is merely inconvenient. He used the voice doctors use before saying the scan showed more than expected. Nora, the break-in wasn't the beginning, he said, sliding 3 printed pages toward me. It was the recovery attempt. I stared at the documents. They were loan inquiry records, digital access logs, and a rejected collateral verification request from Northline Private Lending. My name appeared twice. Lily's trust appeared once. My signature appeared on a scanned preliminary authorization I had never seen before. The forged version was almost good, but whoever made it had copied the way I signed birthday cards, not legal documents. I felt my stomach turn slowly like an elevator dropping. When I asked, Elias tapped the date. This morning, 2 hours before they entered your house. I looked toward the bedroom where Lily was sleeping. So they didn't panic and break in, I said. They came because the bank said no. Elias nodded, and then he told me the part that made every old memory rearrange itself. Vanessa's real estate license had been under review for mishandling client funds in a failed condominium sale. Dad had a private lawsuit pending from a land deal he had guaranteed for one of his old friends. The numbers were not small. They were the kind of numbers that make people stop thinking of family as people and start thinking of them as exits. Your mother suspected something like this years ago, Elias said quietly. Not this exact plan, but the pattern. That's why Cedar Trust requires layered authorization, court notification for trustee replacement, and biometric confirmation for any collateral use. My mother had been soft-spoken, almost gentle to a fault. I remembered her making tea, when Dad shouted folding napkins, when Vanessa stormed out, lowering her eyes so peace could survive dinner. I had mistaken that for weakness. Sitting there with her protection spread in front of me, I realized my mother had not been weak. She had been documenting quietly while the rest of us survived loudly. By morning, Vanessa had begun her second invasion. This time she did not need a stolen key. She used Facebook. Her post was long, emotional, and poisonous in exactly the way I expected. She wrote that I had sent police after our aging father because he asked for help. She said I had inherited Mom's bitterness along with Mom's money. She said some people become rich enough to forget who raised them and cruel enough to punish a sister for drowning. She never mentioned Lily crying. She never mentioned the fake notary stamp. She never mentioned my mother's jewelry in her purse or the trust transfer form with my name already typed into the resignation line. By noon, relatives were texting me in waves. Aunt Carol said, "Your father made mistakes but jail," Cousin Marin wrote. "You could have handled this privately." One uncle simply sent shame on you. I looked at each message and felt the old reflex rise. That desperate need to explain until everyone understood I was not the villain. Then I looked at Lily's backpack by the door and deleted nothing, answered nothing. Elias was the one who taught me the power of silence with teeth. He drafted a statement so short it felt almost rude. I posted it once in the family group chat and nowhere else. There is an active criminal investigation involving unlawful entry into my home, attempted access to a minor's trust, and threats made in the presence of my daughter. I will not discuss evidence publicly. Anyone spreading false statements about my child or this case should expect communication from my attorney. I did not attach the video. I did not attach the audio of Dad saying courts listen when grandfathers claim a child is unsafe. I did not attach the photo of Vanessa's purse contents lined up on my coffee table. I gave them nothing to debate, and that made them nervous. Within hours, people started checking public arrest records. Someone found Vanessa's licensing review. Someone else noticed Northline Private Lending had filed a fraud alert. By evening, Aunt Carol texted again, this time with only 3 words. What really happened? The worst message came from a blocked number while I was making Lily toast she barely touched. I answered because Elias was sitting across from me and nodded once, already recording with Washington's consent rules explained and followed. Vanessa's voice came through thin and shaking. "Nora, please don't do this," she said, as if I had broken into her home, as if I had stood over her child. "If you let them push these charges, I'll never work again." I stared at the rain-dark window above the sink. "You should have thought about work before you brought a fake notary stamp into my house." She inhaled sharply. "Dad made it worse. I only wanted the papers. I never would have hurt Lily." That sentence opened something brutal in me. "You used her fear as a tool." Vanessa cried harder. "Mom would hate what you've become." I looked at the cabinet where I kept my mother's chipped blue mug. The one thing Vanessa had never wanted, because it had no resale value. "No," I said. "Mom knew exactly what I had to become." Then I ended the call. Lily stopped sleeping through the night. That was the consequence no court record could fully measure. She woke at 2:17 the first night, 3:04 the next, then again before dawn, standing silently beside my bed because she did not want to wake me, even though fear already had. She asked if Grandpa could tell a judge I was a bad mother. She asked if Aunt Vanessa could come through a window. She asked if Grandma had really made a mistake leaving the trust for her. I answered every question carefully, because I knew children build their future understanding of love from the sentences adults choose in moments like that. "Grandma did not make a mistake," I told her. "Grandma protected you. And no one gets to take you from me because I said no to something wrong." 2 days later, I took her to a child therapist recommended by the victim advocate. Lily brought her stuffed rabbit and did not speak for 10 minutes. Then she whispered, "I told him I didn't know." But he kept asking. I sat in the waiting room and cried without making a sound. The detective assigned to the fraud side was named Mara Rains, and she had the patient eyes of someone who had watched too many families call crimes misunderstandings. She met me at Elias's office with a laptop, printed bank logs, and a timeline that made my skin go cold. Vanessa had searched my professional profile 6 times in 1 week. Dad had called the county court clerk asking about emergency guardianship procedures. Northline had received a scanned authorization from an IP address linked to Vanessa's brokerage office. And 3 weeks earlier, someone had tried to reset the password to my safe deposit account using security answers only family would know. They were building pressure from multiple directions, Detective Rains said. Financial, emotional, and potentially custody-related. I thought about Dad telling Lily courts listen to grandfathers. That had not been an empty threat. It had been rehearsal. For the first time, fear moved through me not as panic, but as grief. I had not simply been betrayed by people I loved. I had been studied by them. The message that changed everything arrived from the forensic extraction of Vanessa's phone. Elias read it before I did, and I saw his expression harden in a way I had never seen. "Nora," he said, "you need to prepare yourself. The text was from Vanessa to Dad, sent 20 minutes before they entered my home. If Lily cries hard enough, Nora will sign anything. Dad had replied, "Don't touch her. Just scare her enough to make Nora understand what she caused." I read those words until they stopped looking like language. Don't touch her. Just scare her. As if terror were clean because it left no bruise. As if my daughter's shaking hands were acceptable collateral damage. I thought I had reached the bottom of what they were capable of, but that sentence opened a deeper room. Elias said, "This removes any argument that Lily's involvement was accidental." I looked at him, then at the rain blurring the city beyond his office window. "Good," I said. "Then we stop calling this family drama." The preliminary hearing took place on a Thursday morning, under a sky the color of wet concrete. I remember that because Lily had asked whether rain meant bad things were about to happen, and I had told her weather was not a warning, only weather. Still, as I walked into the courthouse with Elias beside me and Detective Rains ahead of us, I felt the old family weather gathering in my chest. Dad sat at the defense table in a dark suit, his gray hair combed neatly, his expression arranged into wounded dignity. Vanessa sat 2 chairs away from him, pale and perfectly dressed, with no trace of the woman who had stood in my hallway wearing gloves and holding my mother's jewelry. When she saw me, her eyes filled instantly, as if tears were part of her legal strategy. Dad did not cry. He looked disappointed, which had always been worse. He wanted me to feel like the daughter who had brought shame into the room, instead of the daughter who had finally stopped hiding it. Their attorney opened by calling it an unfortunate family misunderstanding fueled by grief, financial pressure, and poor communication. I almost admired the softness of the language. It made breaking into my home sound like knocking too loudly. It made terrifying Lily sound like speaking out of turn. It made forged trust paperwork sound like paperwork confusion. Then the prosecutor stood and played the first audio clip. The courtroom speakers carried the sound of Lily crying. Small and breathless, followed by Dad's voice, demanding the silver folder. No one moved. Then came Vanessa's voice from my bedroom, saying, "She always hides important papers, near boring things." Vanessa bowed her head. Dad stared straight ahead, but his jaw worked once hard. The prosecutor did not dramatize anything. She did not need to. She simply said, "This was recorded before Miss Whitaker entered the home while the child was alone with the defendants." In that silence, their misunderstanding began to die. The hallway video came next. It showed Vanessa crossing from my bedroom to the living room with the cedar jewelry case under one arm and the silver folder in her hand. It showed Dad blocking the archway while Lily sat trapped on the sofa. It showed me entering drenched from rain. My phone raised my face, so still I barely recognized myself. Watching it from the witness bench felt like watching another woman survive the moment I had lived. Their attorney tried to object when the prosecutor paused the video on Vanessa's purse, but the judge allowed the inventory photos. One by one the images appeared on the screen. Lily's copied birth certificate, the fake notary stamp, the trustee resignation form, the collateral authorization, my mother's jewelry case, my property records, and the folded document with my signature copied badly enough to insult me. Vanessa began crying again. This time no one reached for tissues. Dad's face changed only when the notary stamp appeared. Not guilt, calculation. He was searching for the next version of the story. Elias testified after Detective Rains. He explained Cedar Trust in a voice so calm it made every fact heavier. My mother had created it 7 years earlier after discovering irregular withdrawals from a joint family account and a suspicious quitclaim draft involving Vanessa's brokerage office. I had known pieces of that history, but not all of it. I knew Mom had been afraid near the end. I knew she made me promise Lily's inheritance would never become family money. I did not know she had left a sealed statement with Elias to be opened only if Dad or Vanessa ever attempted to challenge the trust. The judge allowed part of it to be read. My mother's words filled the courtroom through Elias's steady voice. "I love both my daughters, but love does not require me to ignore patterns. Nora protects what others consume." I closed my eyes. Vanessa made a sound like pain. But I could not tell whether she grieved my mother's judgment or only the fact that it had survived her. Then came the twist neither Dad nor Vanessa had expected. The silver folder was never the real trust file. Elias explained that after Vanessa's first suspicious request for information months earlier, he had advised me to keep a marked decoy packet at home. It contained harmless copies, outdated summaries, and embedded tracking codes tied to fraud monitoring. If anyone scanned, uploaded, or submitted those pages to a lender, the receiving system would flag them as compromised trust materials. Northline Private Lending had received scans of that packet at 9:42 that morning from a network associated with Vanessa's brokerage office. The fraud alert had triggered before they ever stepped into my house. Vanessa looked at her attorney as if he could unmake technology. Dad finally turned toward her, and the anger in his eyes was so naked that even she flinched. For years, they had treated paperwork as something they could bend around other people's exhaustion. My mother had turned paperwork into a locked door, and they had broken their own hands trying to force it open. The prosecutor saved the text messages for last. I had thought I was prepared. I was not. Seeing those words projected in a courtroom was different from reading them in Elias's office. If Lily cries hard enough, Nora will sign anything. Then Dad's reply, "Don't touch her. Just scare her enough to make Nora understand what she caused." The judge read the screen without expression, but the courtroom changed. Even people who had come to watch an ordinary hearing seemed to understand that something sacred had been crossed. Their attorney rose again, saying the messages were taken out of emotional context. The judge looked at him and asked, "What context makes the intentional frightening of a 9-year-old child acceptable?" He sat down. Vanessa covered her face. Dad did not. He looked at me then finally, truly, and I saw rage beneath the collapse, not remorse. Rage that I had allowed strangers to hear what he believed should have stayed inside family walls. When I testified, my voice surprised me. It did not shake. I described the security alert, the sound of Lily crying, the hidden vehicles, the missing spare key, the documents in Vanessa's purse, and Dad's threat about custody. Their attorney tried to suggest that my work as a forensic accountant made me suspicious by nature, trained to see fraud where there might only be desperation. I turned to him and said, "My job teaches me not to confuse desperation with permission." The prosecutor asked what changed for me that day. I looked at Dad, then Vanessa, then the empty chair, where Lily did not have to sit because her recorded child interview had been accepted instead. They had taken money from me before, I said. They had taken peace from me before. But that day they tried to take safety from my daughter and call it family. Dad looked away first. Vanessa cried harder. I felt nothing move toward her. Not cruelty. Not pity. Just distance. By the end of the hearing, the judge imposed strict no-contact orders, upheld the fraud investigation, and allowed the charges to proceed in full. Vanessa's brokerage license was immediately suspended pending review after Detective Rains confirmed the source of the scanned documents. Dad was ordered to surrender any remaining keys, access cards, and documents related to me or Lily. The court also froze any pending loan applications connected to my identity, Lily's trust, or my mother's estate. When the judge announced that Cedar Trust would remain under enhanced protection and that any future attempt to interfere could trigger additional criminal charges, Dad's shoulders dropped for the first time. Vanessa turned and searched the benches behind her, looking for a relative, a friend, anyone who still saw her as the victim. Most people looked down. Aunt Carol was there, sitting in the back row. She had sent me "Shame on you" 3 days earlier. Now she covered her mouth with one hand and cried silently. Outside the courthouse, the rain had stopped, but everything still shone like it had been washed too hard. Aunt Carol approached me near the steps. "Nora," she said, her voice breaking, "I didn't know. I wanted to say, you didn't ask. I wanted to say, you chose the version that cost you less courage. But I was tired of spending perfect sentences on people who arrived only after evidence made compassion safe, so I said, now you do." Elias walked me to the car, carrying the leather folder that held my mother's final protection like a shield. My phone buzzed with a message from Lily's therapist. Lily had drawn our house again, this time with the front door locked and 2 tall trees on either side. Underneath she had written, "Mom came back." I sat in the driver's seat and pressed the phone to my chest. That was when I finally cried, not because Dad and Vanessa were losing, but because my daughter had seen me come back and believed it mattered. The guilty pleas came 6 weeks later, not because Dad and Vanessa suddenly discovered remorse, but because evidence had become heavier than denial. The fraud alerts, the video, the text messages, the fake stamp, the attempted loan verification, the copied birth certificate, and Lily's recorded interview formed a wall their attorneys could not climb. Dad pleaded to unlawful entry, attempted coercion, identity fraud, conspiracy, and child intimidation. Vanessa pleaded to burglary. Attempted trust fraud, possession of a false notary instrument, and harassment after violating the no-contact order by calling me through blocked numbers and relatives. The judge did not shout when she sentenced them. That almost made it stronger. She said family relationships did not soften the crime. They deepened the violation because Lily should have been safest with people who claimed to love her. Dad received jail time, probation, mandatory counseling, restitution, and a 5-year protective order. Vanessa received a split sentence: home confinement, probation, restitution, and the professional consequence she had feared. Most her real estate license was revoked. When the restitution amount was read, Vanessa made a small sound like someone had stepped on her future. The total included repairs to my house, replacement locks, security upgrades, legal costs tied to the criminal case, therapy, expenses for Lily damaged property, and the attempted fraud investigation. Dad stared at the table as if numbers had finally betrayed him the way he believed people had. For years, he had used money as a fog. He borrowed without calling it borrowing, demanded without calling it demanding, took without calling it theft. Now every dollar had a name, a date, a document, and a consequence. Elias later filed the civil judgment that allowed liens against Dad's disputed land and Vanessa's remaining assets until the restitution was paid. That was the part they never imagined. They had come into my house searching for papers that would let them take Lily's future. Instead, the papers my mother saved, the records I kept, and the systems Elias built took away their excuses, their access, and a large piece of their financial comfort. After sentencing, Vanessa turned around once. I think she expected me to look broken or triumphant, maybe both. I was neither. I stood with Elias beside me and Detective Rains a few feet away, holding the folder that had once felt like a burden and now felt like proof that my mother had loved us in the only way she still could. Vanessa's eyes were swollen, but there was still accusation in them. She mouthed something I could not hear. Maybe please. Maybe sorry. Maybe my name. Dad did not turn around at all. That hurt more than I wanted to admit. Some childish part of me still wanted the father from old photographs to look back, to realize he had frightened his granddaughter, to understand that he had mistaken authority for love. But he walked away with the same stiff pride he had carried into every room of my childhood. Elias touched my elbow gently and said, "You don't need his apology for the order to hold." I nodded. But I was only beginning to understand he meant more than the court order. Home did not become peaceful all at once. The new locks clicked louder than the old ones. The cameras glowed blue at night. Lily still checked the back door before bed, then asked me to check it again after she saw me check it. Sometimes she woke from dreams where Grandpa was standing in the hallway holding papers instead of hands. I stopped telling her there was nothing to be afraid of because that would have been a lie dressed as comfort. Instead, I told her, "You are safe now. And I will check with you until your body believes it." We made rituals. We locked the door together. We put her stuffed rabbit on the nightstand facing the hallway like a tiny guard. We baked cinnamon muffins on Sundays because my mother used to make them when rain trapped us indoors. Ordinary things became repairs. Toast, homework, laundry. A movie paused because Lily wanted to ask whether villains always knew they were villains. I told her most people call themselves heroes until consequences correct them. The relatives divided themselves without me needing to ask. Some apologized sincerely. Aunt Carol came over with soup and no excuses, which was the only reason I let her in. She sat at my kitchen table and said, "I believed him because it was easier than believing he could do that." I appreciated the honesty more than any dramatic apology. Others disappeared embarrassed by their own messages, or still loyal to the version of family where silence mattered more than truth. I let them go. That was new for me. Old Nora would have written long explanations, sent screenshots, offered context, tried to remain lovable to people who had needed evidence before offering concern for my child. New Nora changed my number, updated the school pickup list, removed Dad and Vanessa from every emergency contact form, and gave Lily's school a copy of the protective order. I learned that boundaries feel cruel only to people who benefited from you not having them. To everyone else, they look like doors finally working properly. 3 months later, a letter came through Vanessa's attorney. Elias called before forwarding it, and I could hear the warning in his pause. The letter was not an apology. It said Vanessa understood mistakes were made but asked whether I would consider reducing restitution because rebuilding her life would be difficult with a criminal record and no license. I read it once then again, waiting for the old guilt to rise. It did guard. It did, but weaker now, like a voice from another room. I thought about Lily sitting on the sofa crying into her rabbit while Vanessa searched my bedroom. I thought about, if Lily cries hard enough, Nora will sign anything. I thought about my mother writing, Nora protects what others consume. Then I slid the letter back into its envelope and handed it to Elias. No reduction, I said. He did not smile, but there was warmth in his eyes. His official response was one sentence: Miss Whitaker declines. I kept a copy. Not because I needed revenge, but because I wanted proof that I had finally chosen my daughter without negotiating the price. Spring arrived slowly the way it does in Seattle, with pale light, wet sidewalks, and stubborn flowers pushing through soil no one had softened for them. One afternoon, Lily brought home a drawing from therapy. It was our house again, but this time there were no police cars, no dark windows, no tiny crying girl on the sofa. She had drawn the porch light gold, the front door blue, 2 tall cedar trees on either side, and both of us standing under the roof while rain fell around us but not on us. At the bottom in careful purple marker she had written, "Safe means people can't come in just because they are family." I sat beside her on the couch and tried not to cry too hard. "That's a very wise sentence," I said. She leaned against me. Did Grandma know I looked at the cedar jewelry case repaired now, and resting on the shelf no longer hidden? "Yes," I said. "I think Grandma knew some people need locked doors even when you love them." On the first anniversary of the break-in, Lily and I did something I never expected. We stayed home. I had thought I would need to take her somewhere cheerful, distract her with a movie or a hotel pool or a shopping trip, but she asked if we could make cinnamon muffins and plant something by the porch. So we bought a small cedar sapling and dug a hole in the damp front yard. Lily patted soil around its roots with serious concentration, then stood back and inspected it like a builder examining a wall. "It's little," she said. "So were you once," I told her. She smiled at that. As evening settled, we turned on the porch light and sat on the steps wrapped in sweaters. For a long time, neither of us spoke. Them room windows. Are we stinner room? Our looked at our warm windows, our locked door, the little cedar tree taking root in ground no one else could claim. "Yes," I said. "We are the part of the family that learned how to love without fear." I used to think revenge meant making people suffer. I know better now. Revenge can be quieter than that. Sometimes revenge is a mother changing the locks and not feeling guilty. Sometimes it is a little girl sleeping through the night again. Sometimes it is a lawyer sending one sentence where an entire lifetime of excuses used to fit. Sometimes it is watching people who counted on your silence meet the sound of their own words in court. Dad and Vanessa did regret what happened, but not in the way I once needed. They regretted being caught exposed, ordered to pay, and forbidden to return. I stopped waiting for a cleaner kind of remorse. My peace could not depend on their honesty. My daughter's safety could not depend on their transformation. That was the lesson my mother left inside every protected document, every locked clause, every quiet precaution. Blood can explain why someone found the door. It does not give them the right to enter. And when they used my child's fear as a key, one call finally taught them the lock had changed.